Equity financing versus debt financing. I get this question all the time. This is the big question. Now, if you talk to the debt guys, they'll talk about debt. If you talk with the equity guys, they'll say you should only take equity. That story is starting to change, though, in the equity world. Thanks for tuning in to Grow by Joe. In this video, I'm going to talk about this question I get all the time. Should I raise equity? Should I borrow debt? It's a really good question. There's no cookie cutter answer, but in this video, I'm going to share my point of views from financing over $2.5 billion of deals over the last 16 years since 2007. So stay tuned. This will always be a battle and a topic between debt and equity guys. Now, I'm a debt guy. I've done some private equity deals. I'm familiar with private equity. A lot of times when you speak to debt guys, they would just be like debt, 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 debt. Equity guys would be equity, 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 equity. Now, as this market has shifted and changed coming out of COVID, some of the equity guys are saying, whoa, 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 let me not raise equity in this unfavorable environment and let me look at debt. Every business has a time and place for this. Like, certain businesses, it makes sense to raise equity. Other businesses, it makes no sense to raise equity. You can build a business on debt. Don't give up the equity. Sometimes it's a combination of both. Sometimes it's debt to get to a place, then raise equity. Sometimes it's debt to a place, a little bit of equity, a little bit of debt. So it really just depends on you and your business, and you have to really stop and think about this. But also, depending on the business, can you bootstrap it? Can you scrape together everything you have, credit cards, cash, dollars, and get started and just reinvest and grow the business organically? It'll be harder in the beginning. But even if you raise equity, it's still hard to build and grow a business. I started my business from zero out of my spare bedroom, and I didn't raise any equity. I used all my cash, I used all my credit cards. Some people could say I'm crazy. I am, but I did it, and I didn't have to give up equity. So you really have to think about it. If you're in a business that's going to take millions of dollars of testing, whether it's product development or pharmaceuticals or laboratory driven, then you may have no choice but to raise equity. That is what it is. It's a different business. But if you're in a business that can start to cash flow and generate sales and revenues quick and fast, I'd hold up on giving up equity so fast. Let's talk about the pros and cons. So if you give up equity, the pros are when you raise equity, usually if the business doesn't work out, you're not on the hook for that money. Also, when you raise equity, usually there's no payments and interest and things that start. There may be like a convertible note that has some interest attached to it that converts into equity, but for the most part, it doesn't work like a loan where you're gonna have to start a repayment period and worry about monitoring that cash flow coming out of your business. The other pros with equity, and I recommend if you are gonna raise equity, is raise equity from people that can also bring more value than just the money. So a lot of times, smart entrepreneurs will raise equity, whether it's from private equity groups, from VC groups, or just other private investors that bring a wealth of knowledge to the table or access that will also help grow and scale their business faster. And if you're going to raise money from that person and they've got access, if they put their own money in, they're going to want to help leverage their own network to help you grow and scale your business. So that could be a really helpful tool. And it's what they call smart money, is borrowing money from groups that can bring other things to the table besides money that can help you grow smarter and faster. The other thing is if you're going to raise equity, you want to make sure, is it just like a one and done deal, or is the group that you're working with or individual that you're working with capable of maybe supplying more equity down the road if things are going well, or if you have a need for additional equity down the road. These are the questions that I would be asking. Let's talk about the cons. You're giving up equity in your business. Once you give that equity up, you've given it up. You can't get it back unless you buy it back. If you're able to grow your business without giving up equity, and you can do it in other ways or organically, then you've given up that equity and it can cost you a lot of money later on. Now, that's the constant battle with giving up equity that you'll have to do in the very beginning. If you're going to raise money out of the gate to build and start a business, you may have to. It is what it is. Or if your business has been growing, is like, do I raise equity at this point? And the questions I would be asking myself is, do I really need to raise equity in order to get my business from point A to point B? So let's talk about the pros and cons of debt. So the pros to borrowing money are you don't have to give up equity, right? You can grow and scale the business. You can use the business to fund itself, to grow and get to the next level, to build more market share, more market value, and then maybe give up or raise equity at a later point when the business is at a bigger and better place. If your business is cash flowing and doing well, there are a lot of lending options out there that could be very favorable to you and your business. But what's also really important is not only could you borrow money today with certain lenders out there, you can keep borrowing money to keep fueling the business and fueling growth. So if your business is cash flowing, if you are profitable, you should be able to work with a lender that can grow and scale with you, where you can get your business to a much, much bigger place and then decide to sell at that point or raise equity at a much higher place where you're raising more money but giving up less equity in your business. So those are things that you really want to contemplate. And if your business can service debt and handle debt, unless you're raising equity from a really smart investor that can bring a lot more value to the table, that can help you scale that much faster, it may not be worth it to raise equity and just stick to the debt route. If you're going to raise equity, then the reason to do it is that you're going to really grow that much faster, and there are going to be other things that are brought to the table that are going to help you do so. The disadvantages with debt are the obvious: is when you borrow money, the business is on the hook for that money. Also, when you borrow debt, the payments start usually pretty immediately. So you're going to have to service that debt. You're going to have to pay back that debt. So you want to make sure too, some debt today is personally guaranteed, some is not. So those are the questions you want to ask and understand what you're getting yourself into. But that's really the biggest disadvantage, is that the business is now going to have to support that debt and repay that debt. That can change things for you in your business. You want to make sure that you're ready to handle that debt and don't put yourself in a bad position. And you want to make sure that when you're borrowing debt and you go to grow, a lot of times we want to grow fast, and adding people, adding things, we add a lot of expenses to the business, but the profitability doesn't keep up with it. So you want to make sure, if you're borrowing debt, that the things that you're doing in a very well managed way, so you can continue to support that debt and you don't put the business in a bad spot. Okay, so just to recap here and wrap up, a few last things. Take the time to look and research and get information on both debt and equity in your business and what that looks like. Sometimes it makes sense to go down the equity path just to see what terms look like, the process looks like. It's good practice for you and your business. So don't ignore that, but look at those options. You should always have private equity groups, VC groups, private investors. You should always have those relationships, because you never know when there's going to be a need or a real big opportunity that you may need to raise some equity for. Separately, know your lending options and your debt options. It's really important that you understand what's out there. Get ahead of this. You don't want to make fast decisions on this and then regret it later on, especially when giving up equity. So I always say, make sure that you know your options and it's all good, and you should be going through these exercises constantly. The other thing to remember, and what I mentioned earlier, is it doesn't need to be one or the other. Maybe it's both. Or maybe it's one now and one later on. There's a time and a place for all of this stuff between lending options, and there's multiple lenders and lending products that are available that may serve your business, and there may be a time and place where you need equity. So don't be stuck with one way or the other. I would say always have an open mind, and the market is constantly changing. Right now, you have to understand, if you're going to borrow money, it's going to be expensive, rates are higher. But also, if you raise and give up equity, the terms are in favor of the private equity groups now, and the terms aren't great as what they once were, and it's harder to raise private equity. So if you are going to look to do this, especially on the private equity side, you got to give yourself a few months, because the processes are much faster, investors are much tighter right now, and they're not so quick to give up dollars like they were just a few years ago. So give yourself some time, explore your options, be open-minded, and remember, it doesn't have to be one way or the other. Thanks for tuning in to Grow by Joe, and I wish you much success in figuring out which option is best for you. Keep growing, keep doing what you're doing. If you have any questions, you want to talk to my team, check out the link below, and we're happy to help you explore debt options that are out in the market today.